this time, I'm going to ask that you fasten your seatbelts.
Launch sequence.
Launch sequence activated.
Launch sequence activated.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Launch sequence.
Woo! Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Launchcast. Ooh, I love this music. Episode 105, entitled A Christmas Carol. And there is a very specific reason for that. Why am I getting feedback here? Who is that?
There's a speaker on. Turn that speaker down. Whose phone? Is that your phone?
There we go. That's okay. We have technical glitches here. That's how we roll here. This is the Launchcast, ladies and gentlemen. Episode 105, A Christmas Carol. We are talking leadership. We are talking life. We are talking growth. And we are talking a little bit of business.
A little bit.
And we're doing it all with some amazing people here. And I'm so excited to announce that we have Carol Silva here as our guest. Thank you so much for being here.
My honor. I'm
so wonderful.
psyched.
So
I'm psyched.
wonderful.
This is kind of like a marriage of all my TV years, lacing in a little bit of where it all started in radio. So I like this.
Yeah, this is great. But first, I want to introduce my co-host today. My guest co-host today is my good friend, Jennifer Muccioli. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Jen. Jen and I have been friends and colleagues for quite a while now, and I'm going to pull up her bio here. Jennifer is a director of communications at KPMG. She is my co-producer at TEDx Farmingdale and the co-host of the upcoming podcast, Sanity is Overrated. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. This is exciting. What a day to be your special co-host.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
I'm so excited to have everybody here. I want to dive in because this is a really important episode. We're going to be talking about a lot of great stuff. So, ready, guys?
Ready.
All right, let's do this. So, my guest today, Carol Silva, who needs no intro, but I'm going to do one anyway. Carol Silva is the Emmy Award-winning, three-time Emmy Award-winning morning and daytime edition anchor at News 12 Long Island, or at least she was before she retired recently. News 12 Long Island, America's first 24-hour regional news network. She is a storyteller, a motivational speaker, and a host. She graduated and received an honorary doctorate from NYIT right here on Long Island. I have a list of awards here. It's insane, this list of awards. 3 Emmy Awards, 30 New York State Associated Press Awards, Regional Cable Ace, Press Club, Women of Distinction, Top 50 Women on Long Island, the Juliet Lowe Award from the Girl Scouts of America highest adult award. The list goes on and on. Recently inducted into the Long Island Journalism Hall of Fame. It's an incredible career spanning nearly 5 decades.
Can I add one?
Please.
In December, also, December 6th, the Emmy Award people, NATAS, the National Academy of Television Arts and Sciences, inducted me into their Silver Circle.
The Silver Circle.
Which is for 25 years of service in television. Although I've had 44 in the business, my husband still laughs at me because as soon as I saw the Silver Circle, I was so touched. I couldn't believe it. It's not the kind of thing you apply for. It's something that they just give you. I have to admit, though, as soon as I saw Silver Circle, I said, what would it take to get to gold? And then it would take getting up at 2:15 in the morning for another 6 or so years. And I said, no, thanks.
Was there any thought of that happening?
No, 2:15 in the morning got to be a little earlier all the time.
Yeah, I'm sure it did. The title of this episode, A Christmas Carol. So I was really thinking about it. I try and do these kitschy little titles, right? I want to make them fun. And I thought I thought of this one after I watched another episode of Crash Caroling that you guys do on News 12, which is so much fun. This year you were surprised, right? Elisa and Elizabeth and Rich, they took you to Holy Trinity High School.
Yes. And the choir sang to me.
Yeah. That's incredible.
That's
the alma mater
incredible.
of Carol and Jennifer both.
Yes.
Amen. HT.
Yeah.
HS.
There we go.
Are we going to start singing?
I should explain what Crash Caroling is.
Yes.
Normally what we do is, and I speak very much in the present tense at News 12 because that is still so much my family.
Yeah.
And I mean, I still have to go back and clean out my office and hang around and do things with them anyway. But it's where we find people who could really use some cheer.
Yeah.
And we've gone from the VA hospital in Northport to schools for special needs kids. One year, the Glen Cove Police Department wrote to us and said they'd like a visit. And we thought, you know what? For our men and women in blue, let's go do
Sure.
that. So we normally just go and we pound down the door. We come in and we start to sing, some of us better than others.
Right.
Erin Colton, notoriously bad. Elizabeth has a great voice, and the rest of us fall somewhere in between. And so that's what Crash Caroling is. But this year, they decided, because it was going to be my last formal year of Crash Caroling, that they would take me to places that would be special to me, including our alma mater, Jennifer Holy Trinity.
Yes.
Right. And you also visited the Northwell Monter Cancer Center, right?
We did, the place where those doctors have saved my life. So if anything, if anybody, they deserved a real holiday cheer.
They
How-
absolutely deserve it.
How emotional was that for you? Describe to us what you felt like being Crash Caroled.
I knew in advance that I was going to be Elizabeth's victim, essentially, her production victim. What I didn't know was that I hope Timmy's not listening. Timmy's 8 years old, her son. She took his little elf glasses and she taped them over,
taped
so I
them,
couldn't
yeah.
see anything. I didn't know where we were going. Brian Gigaleski is our photographer, our feature photographer. He does all the special things in the morning that we do. And he's phenomenal, and he was kind of lying, I think. Okay, we're going to go left. And go, oh, look, we're on the highway. Oh, look. And I thought, because I was literally blindfolded the entire time. When I went to Holy Trinity, aside from almost tripping when I got out of the car because I couldn't see where I was, and my toe hit the curb as I got out. We parked illegally, Jennifer, right in front of the school. Were you not allowed to
where
park?
you're not allowed to park.
That's where we parked.
Okay.
It felt so great.
Okay.
So
And nobody
great.
said curb there. Watch that curb.
No, none of that. But rule breakers. We were
Okay.
rule breakers. And when I went in and they just started singing, I mean, they're such a powerful art school also. So that was beautiful.
Sure.
And then when they took me to Monter to thank those doctors, how do you thank somebody for saving your life?
Yeah.
So
exactly.
emotional, phenomenal. It was a moment in life I'll never forget.
Yeah. A spark moment. A spark moment. That's something that I talk about on this show a lot. So, along my journey as a thought leader, as just a man, a father, a husband, I've discovered these moments in life, right, that I like to call spark moments. And they're these moments that you look back on, and whether you're in the moment or not, you kind of realize, yeah, this is one of those mental snapshots. This is a moment that will be, for some reason or another, pivotal in my life. And some of them are those reflective moments like this one, and some of them are those moments where there's really a change that sparks, right? And we'll get to talk about that. So I want to jump right in and ask the first question that we ask of all our guests here. Carol, are you a leader?
I am a leader, but I didn't start out to be a leader. It's interesting. I look back. My dad was in the military for 20 years. I grew up with a lot of other military families, never in military housing, not over in Mitchell Field back in the day, although we had the option, or in Uniondale, we had the option. My parents went for a Levitt House, the third level of military housing on Long Island.
Right.
So we lived in a Levitt House in Hicksville, backed into Stewart Avenue.
Yep.
I was 5 houses away from Holy Trinity, and we grew up there. And I describe it as being part of a tribe. 3 kids born in 3 years with my dad in the military, U.S. Naval Corpsman, 1st Marine Division, Okinawa, Iwo Jima, South Pacific for years and years. Saw the worst of the worst. Ended up at St. Albans Naval Hospital at one point. And my mom and her sisters were in the canteen, kind of like the USO. That's where they met.
Wow.
There. And they ended up getting married. They lived in St. Albans for the first year. We moved to Long Island. I was in Hicksville from the time that I was 13 months old. So the first thing that I learned was how to function in a tribe, how to do for other people. My dad is Mexican. His relatives are all in California, some in Mexico. In fact, his sister ended up moving back to Mexico. And so I grew up really with my Irish-American Fitzsimons family. I still have the Fitzsimons family reunion at my home every year, which is fabulous. So I grew up learning how to do for others. And somewhere along the way, I think that the morals and the ethics and the optimism of my parents was the thing that gave me the attitude that I had, certainly helped with the success that I've had, the career success that I've had. And I became a leader because other people started to watch what I was doing. And I never realized how much of a leader until this last year.
Yeah.
until my retirement. When I look at the things that people said, by the way, retiring from News 12 and getting up at 2:15 in the morning, I've not retired from life by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, you're my first stop on What's Next.
Oh, I'm so
This
happy.
is my
How
very
honored.
first stop
We
on
are
What's
honored.
Next.
How
well, this is kind of a
honored.
challenge. Okay, we're going to ask you anything about your life. Okay, I'm in. I'm
Yeah,
ready. I'm
and
ready
that's-
to try this.
That's really the funny thing about this. I do a lot of research when I do these interviews, and I'm still new at it, but I'm really enjoying diving into leadership, right, and what that means for a variety of people. We've had a musician. We had Mike Del Giudice from
Who I
Billy Joel's
love.
band. Yeah, unbelievable guy. We've had Trisha Brook, who's almost nominated for 2 Academy Awards for documentaries, and award-winning director. We've had a first lieutenant from the U.S. Army last week. We had Matt Campo, the CEO of Ronald McDonald House, Long Island. And so we're getting a look into the minds of leadership in all these different industries. And what I love is when I do this research and I really dive back, because I wanted to go way back. I wanted to go back to Bond Lane in Hicksville.
43
Yeah.
Bond Lane, Hicksville.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to Bond Lane and talk about, your parents and kind of see what about your childhood growing up shaped the leader that we see today. You mentioned your father, Mexican American, your mother, Irish American, and you described them as Ricky and Lucy.
Yeah, they were like Ricky and Lucy when we were kids. I mean, my father played the Spanish classical guitar that we still have. It's a slightly smaller guitar. And he used to get up. There were pictures of my parents where my dad would be standing up and singing in the hotels. And he wasn't hired to do that. They would go. That was, the date back
Yeah.
in the day.
Yeah.
Sure.
And there he was with we just watched the movie The Two Popes. Bob and I did, my husband and I, 2 nights ago.
Yeah.
And the beginning and the end of it is Besame Mucho. Now, when you're a little kid, you sing songs, right? All kids sing songs. And Mary had we all sang Besame Mucho.
Yeah.
My cousin texted me, Kathleen said, oh my gosh, look at that, Besame Mucho in the beginning and the end. So,
Yeah.
I started to answer the question before, and I didn't finish. What I learned from my parents was morals, and I learned to never quit. I learned to think about everybody else and just to keep going. I learned not to say a lot of negative things to myself. And then when I was at work, I worked as hard as I could, even when it didn't go well. And it didn't go well in each place along the way. And yet I ended up with 33 years, 32 of them the anchor desk at News 12 Long Island. I mean, that doesn't happen. Chuck Scarborough was sitting at the next table to me at the Silver Circle Awards in New York City. Sue Simmons came because David Ushery from NBC was being honored. With 33 years, and honestly, 33 years for a woman in front of a television, we used to say all the time, and it's still true to some degree, that the men were allowed to age gracefully and the women aged out.
Yeah.
You aged out.
We
You
wanna
got
talk
older
about that.
looking, you aged out. And so by working hard and keeping at it, and I think being moral, and I think growing, I think becoming a better person, that's what's made me a leader. I have heard from so many people, writers of mine. When it comes to a young writer, you can just change the script that they write. The way that it works is there's a producer who selects the stories overnight and writes a good number of them, and then we have a couple of writers on each show. And the writers would write, and some of them don't even own houses yet. So their perspective on the world isn't completely full. Now, I could just change everything, or I could go back and work with each one of them every day. And that probably was not their favorite thing at the time. But it turns out Mike Fitzsimmons, who became the assistant news director at NBC, said to me one day, I wouldn't have gotten there without you. Jesse Masters is now working at CBS Network right now. He left within the past 6 months. My last day on the air, he took that day so that he could be with me and
Wow.
said, I wouldn't have been there if it hadn't been. And they did not love when I said, listen, this is how we do it. This is why we do it, the way we do it. And I think that was so key to my leadership. And over time, the difference from my 20s, I started in the business at 20 at WBAB, to where I ended at a proud 65, I've become a nicer person too.
Yeah.
Right.
And so my leadership, my leadership power, I don't mean force over other people, but my leadership power has increased with my kindness and my empathy and my understanding. Also, having kids has done that for me.
Sure.
Because I always think about, well, how would I want somebody treating my sons,
Right.
my daughter, especially in the beginning on a new job.
How does it feel for you to hear from Mike and others how impactful you were to their career? I mean, did you know it at the time? How does that feel when he emails or calls you or texts you and say, it's because of you that I'm where I am today?
You know a little bit of it along the way, but I never, ever had any perspective like I do now in the rearview mirror. But it wasn't even a rearview mirror. I mean, I turned around and looked back. Well, I had the little detour that we talked about, right? 2.5 months.
Yeah.
That I was diagnosed September 18th with stage 4 cancer. And I said, and I had already announced in the end of May that I was going to be retiring because while I'm young enough and strong enough and healthy enough, I said in May, young enough, strong enough, and healthy enough to go do something else. It's time for me to expand. And I do so much talking in schools and to school kids and to women's groups. And I have more to say from everything that I've collected in the life that I have led. So I had the opportunity. You threaten to retire or you threaten to die. And that was basically it. People came out of the woodwork. If I tell you, I've gotten thousands and thousands and thousands of letters and calls and messages about, we're thinking of you, we're praying for you, but also, this is what you did for me. So I didn't have this perspective. And what the pity is that so many of us deserve it.
Yeah.
I got it because I'm on television.
Yeah.
And I got it because I had the ability to publicly touch more people, but we all deserve this. I said in the last 4 months since my diagnosis, I'm living my eulogy. I am living my living eulogy right now, and it's awesome. And it reminds me how important it is for us to turn around to the people who've done something right in our lives, even just be nice to us in the day. Even the woman at the counter in Macy's, the, guy at the car wash in 7-Eleven, who holds the door for you, to actually take that moment, take that one moment and pause and turn around and thank somebody and thank them specifically. Thank you, that was kind. Thank you. You know what? I was a little overwhelmed right now, and you did this for me. Thank them specifically. And every time you do that, it's like you plant a seed and you get back twice as much.
Right.
Yep.
That's why my life and my heart and my soul have exploded.
Yeah.
And I think that reflection is so important in leadership, right? I think that this is something I've always struggled with, where when you get the accolades, you get people coming out of the woodworks and saying, you helped me or you're doing a good job. It's tough for me now. And we talked about this a little bit before, the person that I used to be versus the person I am now, and that struggle of keeping that person at bay, making sure they don't come back. For me, it's always been very tough to hear that in recent years.
Because you don't want to feed your ego?
You don't want you want to make sure that what you're doing is benevolent, right? You don't want to feed that ego. You want to make sure you're doing it for the right reasons. And look, in what I do, and not as much as you being a public figure, but I try and be a public figure out there. I'm trying to be a thought leader, and so I don't want people thinking I do this for the accolades. But when they do tell you, when you get that feedback and you're able to reflect on it, it's really helpful for the soul, just to know that you made that difference.
And there's a place in the Bible where it talks about humility being honest. And that's the thing. When you can be honest, my son, love him, but he's a 25-year-old guy. And something will happen, and his comment is, ego, Mom, ego. I mean, always, since he was a teenager, which is okay for the ego check. But I try to turn around and tell him, you know what? When I can be honest and hear that I've done well, it makes me stronger, and then I can do more.
Sure.
So I don't see it as feeding my ego. I believe that we are given the gifts that we're given, not so we can be the most popular kid in school, the best athlete, the best, the most good-looking, best-looking kid in school. That's not why we're given gifts. We're given gifts because we're supposed to use them. Mm-hmm. That's why. Because if you're the most popular kid in school, then you have the number one responsibility to find at least one kid a day, a week, even a month, and make sure that they have a place to sit at the lunch table. Make sure that they at least have somebody that they can talk to in the library when you're not supposed to be talking, but, ask for help. That we're given those gifts because we're supposed to use them for good. And so there are two parts for that. I fully accept that. I fully accept the thank you. Sometimes I'll even say to people, I've heard a lot, you've made a difference in my life. You really have helped. And I turn around and I say, do you mind if I ask you how? And it's not so that I can feel better. Good Lord, I don't know that I could feel any better about myself
Feedback.
right now. But I want to know, what did I do that worked? I want to remember to do that again, or what was happening at that point in my life? Could I have done that better? Whatever it is, it's important to hear those things. And nobody has said to me, ego mom, except Shane in all of that, in that time. So I think it's important, and I think it's so valuable. And one of the mistakes in business, and especially in entertainment, is, and it may be an older management idea, let's not feed their egos because they're going to want more money. But if you don't elevate your human resource, the humans that they are, they will never, no matter what your business is, give you the best.
Right.
And I've had people at work tell me for years, I'll go to reporters or writers and say, you know what, you did a really great job on this today. You did. If it bounces off my head, I go. And I've had people say, I'd love that kind of feedback on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Not every quarter, once a year, 3 times a year. I think that is a failing of management in any business whatsoever. That, listen, managers are busy. I mean, in any day and age, and especially in this day and age, and we're all doing more with less, including our managers.
Sure.
But for managers to be able to do that, to realize that when they see that somebody who's worked their cash register or marketed that product, sold that plan, when somebody's done a good job, to actually go and take less than 60 seconds out of the day and say, that was a great thing you did, and it was a great thing because 3 years ago, you weren't doing that. Look at how much you've grown. Or that was good for the business. You've added business stability. Or that was just kind. And that is a leadership failing. And that's something I did well. And that's something I learned from my father.
Yeah.
I think that's so important, seizing that moment out of every ordinary day just to say to someone, you've impacted my life. You're doing a great job. I felt you're valued because of the following reasons. It's just so important. It fuels humanity. It makes us more mindful, and it really brings us together because your tribe grows as you do that.
Oh my gosh.
Your tribe exponentially grows, and you never know when you need to rely on that tribe to help you through other times in your life.
Amen.
And by you touching people personally, there's a community behind you, ready to rally around you when you need it most. And I know you know a thing or two about that.
Yeah. And that's the biggest difference for me and what I've discovered over the years of running a company and managing people. There's a big difference between managing somebody and leading somebody. Mm-hmm. Huge difference. And when you consider that not only are they a vital part of the machine, but that idea of human capital, right? That these are real people that you're dealing with and real feelings. And so when you lead them in a way where you're empowering somebody and people are part of that team, they're vital to the success of an organization or a team, that's leadership. That's not managing, that's leadership.
And then you get the best out of them.
Yeah.
And so your business does better. I mean, if you need to start with a quote unquote selfish motivation, it benefits the business.
Yeah, absolutely.
If for nothing else.
Absolutely. So I want to touch on real quick, you mentioned before, you touched on faith a little bit. So growing up on Long Island, as we all did, we're both Dalers, Jennifer and I, and you're from Hicksville. Growing up on Long
Dalers
Island,
meaning Farmingdale folks.
Farmingdale.
For those of you who are not Dalers.
Listen, if you don't know what a Daler is,
I'm here to translate every story from
Thank you,
taxes
Carol.
to Dalers. You're welcome.
and so growing up on Long Island, you as we mentioned, went to Holy Trinity High School, as did
Yes.
Jennifer. I want to talk about briefly. I want to talk about that and your faith growing up, because I know you've mentioned this not just today, but in interviews that I've watched recently. I want to talk about what kind of role faith played in your life growing up, and then later on we'll get to what kind of role it's played now.
Well, I could tell you that my mother, who went to Mass every morning, told me once, people ask me why I go to Mass every morning, and I tell them, if you had a daughter like Carol, you'd go to Mass every morning too. But I don't think that's what
Called
it
you
was.
out.
My disclaimer at the front is, you don't have to be Catholic. I don't care what you are, we all have a spiritual side to us. And mine, God is what I believe exists in some form, not some guy up in the sky, but something certainly greater than I exists. And that greater being decided that I would be born into a Catholic family. And so I was. But the first place that I learned what it is to be Catholic or a person of faith is by watching my mother, by watching her be kind to other people, be thoughtful of what other people need before you think of yourself. That was the first part of my faith. And faith is a living thing. It's your guidance along the way. And if you pay enough attention to your guidance, and it's the only thing that you see modeled for you, it is the way that you live. And I live. I'm one of 3 kids. My older brother's 11 months older. The younger is 22 months younger. When I was a kid in that military house in Hicksville, we slept in the same bedroom until I was 6 years old. All 3 of us slept in the same bedroom. And you learn how to think about other people. That's where faith came from. The image that I grew up with was image of a God. Connor, my daughter, I remember her saying when she was little that God was a she. And we said, well, that's good too. That works for me to this, that works for me until this day. Where is faith? Those building blocks that my parents put out there for us, that we would go to church. Church is a time of reflection for me still. It's a place where I go and I close my eyes and I listen to the music and I think, and the busyness stops. That's some of the power of it. It's also the power of the community. Connor and Shane both sang in the choir at church at the 10 o'clock Mass. That is still our community. Those are still, we all have kids in our 20s now. But that's where we go still as parents, because that is our community. And a church community, a synagogue community, a temple community, a mosque community, whatever community is, that's a good thing. A place where people are going to do good. And that faith reminds me that I'm not alone, that I owe it to others, to think of others, to do for others. Faith is everything to me. It really is. And, I had a little detour. September through December. And I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer on September 18th. And as my doctor, Dr. Sitharamu at Monterey Cancer Center at Northwell, when she was giving me the diagnosis with her PA, Kira Barnaby, it was not 4 seconds later that in my head I heard, "Thank you, God, for healing me." The words were there. Wow. The words were present. My husband says to me, "You have great faith. Why don't I have that faith?" Well, the other thing that I do is what my parents gave me, and then they sent us to Catholic school, Holy Family Grammar School, Holy Trinity High School. I was at University of Dayton for 1 year when I was in college, and it had been a Catholic school and was still essentially a Catholic school. And the coolest thing to do during the week was go to 10 o'clock Mass on a Sunday night. You took your shoes off, you crowded, people sat in the aisles barefoot. It was great. You tried to find your shoes when you left. If it was winter, it was a little more challenging. You really needed them. But I have always fed myself faithful or optimistic stuff. It's the people I choose to spend my energy on. It is the people I choose to let in the closest to me. It's what I listen to in the radio. I only set a couple of music buttons. After all my rock and roll years in radio, I only set a couple of music buttons in my car, probably a year or 2 ago, in part because my husband, who is really an audiophile, he listens to everything, loves live music. He probably made enough fun of me, and it was probably peer pressure in my own house. But I love constant reinforcement of what is good. And so it's what I feed my soul all the time, very intentionally, very deliberately. And all of those things combined, here they are. Yeah. Here they are, and here they manifested when they said, "You have stage 4 cancer." It spread from the tumor in your lung, and more than a liter, more than twice this bottle of cancerous fluid around your lung, it spread to 12 tumors in your brain. And I heard that news, and I repeat, the words that went through my head were, "Thank you, God, for healing me." And that is the result of how we choose to build life over time. And it doesn't have to be Catholic, but do you choose to build your life in an optimistic, hopeful, helpful way? And if you do, maybe there's a good chance
Yeah.
that you'll end up there. And on November 11th, I went back. I had a lung surgery October 2nd, I believe, and then to remove the fluid. The tumor was still there, but they were hoping it would grow with the drug. And then October 8th, the following week, I had 3 hours of gamma knife radiation, laser radiation on my head. November 11th, one of the doctors told me, I am looking at your MRI now of your brain, your CAT scan, your picture of your brain. I cannot find any trace of the first 9 tumors, and somebody would have to show me where the other 3 brain tumors had been to know they ever existed. It's
incredible.
It is great science. We have the most incredible medical people on Long Island. A former number 2 man at Sloan Kettering, Dr. Rich Barakat, is now the head of oncology at Monter, at Northwell, and is bringing in now all these people. Now that his first year there is over, the no poaching year is over, he's bringing in the best of the best from around the country, and he's a remarkable man. We have incredible science there. But the doctors keep telling me it's my attitude, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
And you can dial that back to your childhood when you said, I learned at a very early age not to say negative things to myself.
I will not repeat negative things to myself.
Yeah.
I tell school groups, I tell my own kids, if somebody came to the door and they said, hey, drink this, it's poison, you'd slam the door in their face. But why do we let people not only say negative things to us, but then, that we can help if somebody says it, but then we repeat it over and over and over and over again to ourselves. When I came from a family that had little or no money, and you sleep in a bedroom with your brothers because there's no money when you're a kid. When I was in college, when I was at University of Dayton, I was working for the chairwoman of the education department, and she had done some great work with the woman who studied death and dying. Jeez, I forget her name. But she had studied under the woman. So, I know somebody out there is yelling the name of. Everybody knows who she is. So I remember her. She was a brilliant woman, the chair of the education department, and she said to me, "For every negative thing you ever say to a child, you have to say 7 positive things." Now, it's not that we should say, you know what, you should never punch your brother in the face again, but you're a really nice person. I mean, we make our kids responsible for and knowledgeable of who they truly are, but let's look for the good and let's reinforce the good as well. And that is what built me to the strength of where I am today.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Wow. It is incredible. And for me, faith within leadership, right, has been so interesting. And I love this point of view because throughout the first 5 interviews we've had, this is a totally unique point of view in terms of faith. I've always looked at faith. I grew up Greek Orthodox, right? So very similar.
I figured as much. When I tried to learn to spell your name, that was one of the first things I thought of.
So very similar to Catholicism in a lot of ways. We are very rooted in our traditions, right? And so I took that growing up, and I still practice the Greek Orthodox religion, but I took that growing up as whenever I needed something, right? Whenever there was something that I was going through, not that I was asking for something, but something that I was going through, and it was one of those dire straits moments, or just something difficult that I or my family was going through. You look to something, whether it's a God or whatever. Faith doesn't have to be a person for somebody. And we chatted a little bit about this before the interview, but faith doesn't have to be a person. Faith could just be a belief in something. And within my own leadership, years of doing what I do for a living has taught me and given me a lot of skills, big skill set. But there are still times, running a business, being a business owner, being responsible for other people, taking care of my family, where you get into a situation and you go, I don't know what to do next. I've exhausted all possibilities. And faith for me has become, you know what, George? I step out of the situation and I go, you know what, George? You always figure this out. You always figure this out. Let it happen. And that's faith for me within my leadership. And I just trust that whatever's going on, whether it's me or a higher power, is going to help to take me to that next level. And it always works out every single time.
I was driving here today, and I thought, what if this doesn't go well? that kind of entered my mind. Or what if there are stumbling blocks in this? And I have come to the point because of my practice. Stephanie Rose, who works with us at News 12, is a yogi. She went to India to be trained as a yogi. I mean, this girl is serious.
Yeah.
Love her. She talks about her practice of yoga, and it's mind, spirit, meditation, big meditation. I'm not into the meditation yet. I have not even begun to master the meditation yet, but I have time now. Nonetheless, the practice for me has become so natural, and I have to say in particular in the last year, where I stopped when I was driving here today, and I thought, what if I'm not doing a good job of this? Like I said, this is my first thing. This is my first step in what's next. What if I haven't done a good job? And I stopped, and I thought for a minute, and I just let God walk in, that God presence, that higher power presence walk in. And that included, you've got this. Yeah. We've got this. And that was it. Yeah. And I went, phew. And I think that if we all did that, instead of wearing our shoulders, up high, we would all relax a lot more. Our shoulders would go. If we gave ourselves that second to pause, to ask whatever higher power, if it's just your past experience, times I've done well, things that have worked out before, it makes all the difference in the world. And then you can do the big exhale.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I want to pause for a minute here to point out something. You mentioned your husband a couple of times. Bob Riley
Yes.
Hi,
posted,
Hi, honey.
"My wife Carol is perfect."
Oh.
Wait, next one. I'm not kidding, not in capital letters, and a heart eye emoji.
Ooh.
Aw, honey, that's really sweet. Just remember that, because we're going to take a screenshot of that, and I'm going to bring that home.
That's fabulous,
He is
Bob.
a good man and a great soul. He really is a great man and a great soul.
We're getting some good engagement here on social media, and so I think I'm going to extend out the live part a little bit. We give them a little more?
Let's give him more.
Let's
What
give
do you
them-
people want to know?
Let's give them some more. Let's dive into the rest of the agenda because, wow, I love this. I love this. I love this. Okay. So Holy Trinity we talked about. Now let's move on to college and your career. So I read a couple of conflicting things. So this I want to clarify. So I know you went to NYIT for your undergrad and you had that honorary doctorate. Did you also attend Nassau and the University of Dayton?
Yeah, I did. Could you just tweak down my
Sure,
headphones just a little bit, please? Up
that?
a little. Sorry, folks, we're going to test this. Just bring it up a little, a little, up, down a little. That's what happens when I have my own control. Perfect.
Good? Okay, perfect.
Bob's now saying she likes control. Well, I do of my earpiece, at least. I went to Holy Trinity, and when I graduated from Holy Trinity in 1972, I applied to Fairfield University. My cousins from Garden City, two boys older than me, 2 years and 3 years older, had gone there. And I had gone to visit with my friends, and it was fun. We got our licenses. We drove to Fairfield. It was the time of our lives. And I got accepted. It was either the first or second year that they were accepting women, which was fabulous. And I showed my parents the letter, and they said, "That's great. Of course, you can't afford to go there. We don't have that. Dad was in the military for 20 years, so we're still on catch-up. You can go to Nassau Community College like your brother." And it wasn't like it is today, where we all just say, well, let's just add to that student debt. In so many ways, my stumbling blocks have become my stepping stones. So I went to Nassau Community College for 2 years. I did kickline for Holy Trinity. I did kickline in Nassau Community College, so it was kind of my entrance to a great part of the student body there. It was so much fun. I learned a lot. I would say my two best college teachers, the ones who I remember most, two of the three, were Bernie Katz. I took 3 of his 4 psychology courses. He was amazing. He's a therapist, or I guess a psychologist from Plainview. And he was amazing. The first day he walked into class, and he's talking to a bunch of 18, 19-year-old kids, and he said, "You know what? You're crazy. You're crazy. You're crazy." And he looked at all of us and he said, "We all have our crazies." And that's how he started. And I thought, I love this guy. So I took him 3 out of my 4 semesters. Joe Dondero. Joe taught, he was a phys ed and health teacher, and Joe taught that very controversial course, which was supposed to teach people who are 18, 19, 20 years old about their sexuality, about safe sex, and it was very controversial. We weren't supposed to talk about that then.
Right.
But Joe was bold, and he did, and he was amazing. So I went to Nassau for 2 years. Then I was trying to decide where to go. when it came to the next 2 years. And my mom was pretty smart. She never had the ability to go to college, but she was so bright. And she said, let's not talk about what you want to do because you probably don't know. Let's talk about what you like. And I said, I love people. My kindergarten report card says she loves to talk. So I love to talk. I love to write. And she said, oh, maybe you should be an attorney like Uncle Jim, my godfather. And I said, I don't think so, because Uncle Jim talks a lot about all the solitary time that he spends with books, and that would make me crazy. So I decided that I would go into public relations. There were not a lot of women in radio, and certainly not in television at the time. You know, there was Barbara Walters, but there were not a lot. So I applied to University of Dayton in Ohio because one of my best friends from high school had ended up there, and I thought, well, I could have fun there. And I applied to New York Institute of Technology as a backup because I did want to go away. Got accepted to Dayton. I went August. We spent 9 days out there having a lot of fun. We were living in the same house together, Joanne and I. And I went to register 2 days before classes started. And they said, oh, you have to be here for 3 years. And I said, no, I don't. You took all my credits except my 2 gym credits from Nassau. And they said, no, you're missing microeconomics, macroeconomics.
Oh, boy.
And I said, I can't do this. And I called New York Tech, and I said, do you still have my spot and my scholarship? And they said, yes. And I packed up my car and I drove home.
Oh, wow.
I was heartbroken. And so I did the first semester of my junior year at New York Tech. And that's where I had to, as a public relations major in the communications department, I had to take Radio 101, Television 101, Communications Law, all these writing courses. My Radio 101 course was taught by my third favorite college teacher, Neil Martin. And Neil was a disc jockey at WBAB in Babylon. Our final project was a 15-minute radio show. You had to know how to engineer the board. You had to know the law behind it, public service announcements, commercials, and you had to write and deliver a 5-minute newscast in that. That was my final project. He used to tell me all the time, you're so good, you're so good. Well, New York Tech was 92% men, 8% women at the time. So any woman was good. I mean, we just were good because we weren't the guys.
Sure.
Right.
And what he didn't tell me was he took my final project to WBAB in Babylon when I was 20 years old, and they offered me a job.
Oh, incredible.
Wow.
And I was waitressing at a place called the Salty Dog, and I said, no thanks, I'm making a whole lot of money. I don't need, to do that kind of work. And they said, we're talking about doing on-air work, news.
Yeah.
Now, this is December of my junior year. So
Wow.
now I've been rejected by Dayton. I've come back home. I've done this year here. And I said, I'll take the job. And then I thought, nope, I need to go away. And University of Dayton contacted me and said, we screwed up. We put you in the School of Business. You were never supposed to take all those economics and math courses.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which was an oh wow to me because those were not my strengths.
Whoa.
So I decided to go back there. So I ended up in Dayton the second half of my junior year
So you turned down the job at BAB.
in December, and
You
I went out
packed
to
up,
Ohio,
Back to Ohio, take 2.
had a great time, moved back into that house, had a fabulous time, and I couldn't get on to the radio station. I thought, oh, and I'm going to get on the radio station there because somebody in New York wants me. And those
Wow.
positions were filled. And so I ended up at the end of the school year coming back and contacting somebody at BAB and saying, listen, if you still have that little part-time job, I'll take it. And they said, we have it because we haven't found anybody to work for, $2 an hour or whatever, who has the voice and has the caliber that you do. And so I took it, and I never went back to Dayton to get my trunk full of sheets and butterfly towels.
Oh, jeez.
But it was an incredible stumbling block that became one of the greatest stepping stones of my life.
Wow.
Wow.
So did the internship at BAB begin once you returned back, or was that the original?
It wasn't
when
an
you were 20?
internship.
It wasn't an internship.
It was part-time news.
Okay.
Oh, it wasn't an internship. They offered me a job doing weekend news at WBAB, and 2 afternoons a week I did some of their public service stuff
Wow.
Wow.
over there
Wow,
on
that's
the
incredible.
weekend. It was amazing. I mean, for me to be working in the business at the age of 20 on air, and then senior year, I stayed in New York, I stayed on Long Island, I was living with my parents, and I went back to New York Institute of Technology.
Wow.
And I finished there.
Wow, incredible. And so when did you move to WLIR?
I went from WBAB, which had a very small news department. It was me, a part-time fellow named Sean Burke. Wow, that was a reach. And Joel Martin was the news director. But it was rock and roll radio. I knew there were limits to what we were doing. And back in the days before News 12, before there was this hyper-local, we're going to be your newspaper but on television or in radio, there were a couple of Long Island radio stations that did that job. WGBB in Merrick, WGSM in Huntington. You used to see their call letters on the building right at Route 110 in the Northern State Parkway. There's a building on the north
That's
side.
right. Yep.
WGSM, WCTO. And then WALK in Patchogue.
Yep.
And I knew that I needed to learn more. And so I reached out to WGBB. And the news director there was Ed Grilly. And I brought him my audition tape. And he said to me, if I had a job, I'd hire you tomorrow. And I said, that's great. And that gave me license about once every 6 weeks, not enough to be annoying, but I would call him about once every 6 weeks. And I would say, hey, just want you to know, I did a story about this. I went out and I covered that. I did this, I did that. And one day he said to me, I've just got to hire you so you stop calling me. And that was when I went to GBB, and I really learned. It was serious. It was a 15-minute solo radio news show in the morning. Bill Whitney from the CBS radio network eventually sat next to me. Larry Kofsky from Crane's New York Business was there. Howard Lieberman, who ended up on WINS and CNBC maybe. It was a phenomenal, phenomenal group of men and me.
Wow.
7 of them, one of
One
me.
of you.
Blazing trails, as always.
Blazing trails,
As
baby.
always. And so I want to talk about your time at WLIR, but I think this is a good time to end the live show. And so we appreciate everybody joining in today. I'm going to say a couple of things first. So first of all, thank you for joining. And the rest of this interview will be next week. It will be available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, everywhere where your podcasts are available. Subscribe, review, and you'll get a notification of the podcast. 6 a.m. every Monday morning, these go live. Depending on how the rest of this goes, we may do this as a two-parter.
Ooh.
Honestly.
Wow.
We may do this
First
as a
one
two-parter.
ever.
It's the first one ever because this is a really incredible interview.
Trailblazing again.
Really. Always trailblazing. And so that's that. Follow us at Launchpad CEO. Follow me and you'll get all the updates. Tune into this because we're going to be talking about Carol's career, the rest of her career in radio, her career as a trailblazing broadcaster in hyper-local news. I have a lot to talk about in terms of that. This may be a two-parter, like we said. The next episode, we have the creator, Bobby Rubio, of Disney Pixar's Float, is going to be our guest.
Wow.
Following this. We're going to be talking about a lot of stuff. Bobby created Float to honor his son who is on the autism spectrum. And so we're going to be talking about a lot of great stuff and talking about a project that I'm working on coming up. And so tune into that. So everybody, thank you for tuning in. Carol, pleasure. We'll hop on in a couple of minutes again. Jen, of course, pleasure having you here.
Thank you.
As always. Guys, we'll see you later.
Launch sequence terminated.
Into the black.